Hi, welcome to FedScoopTV. I'm Colby Hockmuth, sitting here with David Egts, Chief Technologist Public Sector for Red Hat. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you.
I'm going to start off with, what are some of the trends you're seeing in open source technology?
Well, one of the big trends that I've been seeing is that a lot of government agencies have gone from, they started off consuming open source technologies, but now they're actually becoming active contributors to really focus on areas where maybe the industry hasn't caught up quite yet to what their mission needs are. So they will use that to be able to infuse technology to basically accelerate things that satisfy their mission. So a good example is NASA. So historically, NASA for decades has been consuming Linux on x86 technologies to do high performance computing, and they've been very successful because it has great price performance. But with the advent of cloud computing, they were looking at, well, how can they use cloud computing to benefit high performance computing as well? And so at the time, back in 2010, there was really nothing out there. And so what they did was that they saw that what they could do is come out with something themselves. And what that was OpenStack. And it wasn't NASA going all by themselves and doing it all on their own. They actually worked with a whole group of people, like including Rackspace and other people, that could also repurpose that technology. And then it got to the point where it got this momentum and industry participation from all over the place. And as a result, NASA didn't necessarily have to be the lead developers because the industry has picked up that role. And as such, they were able to reallocate those resources to do other things. But still, NASA is still pretty active. They are actually working with industry partners like Red Hat, for instance, where they are working with our performance engineering team to make sure that, for instance, NASA Goddard's climate simulations run exceptionally well on top of OpenStack.
And so are there any areas of government that you've seen sort of adopting open source technology quicker than others?
Yeah, well, I would even say that inside of each of the government departments, I would take a look at the developers, because the developers are typically the first people to adopt open source technology. So even if you go back 20 years ago when proprietary Unix was really popular, people would use things like the GNU compiler collection for C code, C++, Fortran. They would use the Apache web server, all on top of it was open source code on top of a proprietary platform. Fast forward a couple of years, then they're doing complete open source stacks. People would call them a LAMP stack, where you have Linux, Apache, MySQL, Postgres and PHP and Perl. And so you have this entire stack. But what I see going on now is the next phase is people doing open source platform as a service. So when we start thinking about cloud technology, so with an open source PaaS, the PaaS provider provides everything from the power plug to the hardware and the networking to the operating system and the patching of that and the application server. And so the developer just needs to bring their application in. And the benefit there is that the developer really only has to focus on the application. But the big benefit with open source platform as a service is that they have portability. So they can go from one PaaS provider to another. They could use it in-house, use it in a community cloud or a public cloud, or even move it to bare metal without a PaaS, because all of the code they've written is based on open source technologies that are widely available.
Right. So what can the private sector learn from government in their adoption of open source technology?
Well, one of the big things that I am really excited about that the government is doing is with development of security policy. So, and because one example is what the NSA and DISA and NIST have been doing around the SCAP security guide. So in the past, every agency would have their own security lockdown policy, and it would be slightly different because it's just different people with different ideas on how to be secure.
Right.
And that led to all kind of problems as far as having somebody work for one agency and then learn a whole new set of lockdown rules if they went to another agency. So their skills weren't as marketable, and being able to attract people was hard. By doing everything as part of the SCAP security guide, you had people, whether they were security engineers or system administrators, all working together. And it's not just government people as well. You also have input from people in industry as well, such as Red Hat and others. And so where I see this going is that in the future you could have the same way that government and government contractors have to lock down according to the STIG or the U.S. government baseline, industry people can come up with their own, develop security policy collaboratively, and be able to do things for, say, like PCI or Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask you. How do you see adoption of open source technology evolving in the next few years?
Well, I think, and we were talking about this earlier about how people are gone from being just consumers of open source technology to being active participants, and I think that trend is going to grow. And the side effect is that that's going to have an effect on the culture inside each of the government agencies. So I think it's going to lead to a lot of an increased level of transparency, because that's really a part of the culture. And I see that personally at Red Hat, the way our culture is, of a culture of openness and being able to collaborate on designs and have the best ideas win, as opposed to top-down dictation. So I think that is something that is really, really interesting.
Great. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is FedScoopTV. I'm Colby Hockmuth.